Welcome to another episode of Artist Spotlight, the podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Stringer. And as usual, we have a terrific guest this episode. Also, as the norm, this podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Maryland Photography Alliance, where you can check out all of the events coming up. You can check out photography contests and photo works and skills information. It's just a really good place to go to learn more about photography and enjoy what we all doing so much. And you can access that at mdphotoalliance.org. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. Well, this episode is a very special one. I'm just absolutely so pleased to have as my guest a photographer, an art director. It may as well be a ninja. I mean, there's almost nothing this man doesn't do. So I'm going to have to go back to college again and probably, earn 5 more degrees just to have anything approaching what my guest, Mathieu Bitton, has done already in his young career. Mathieu, welcome to the podcast and thanks for joining.
Thanks so much for having me, Mitch. I'm really excited that we finally got this together. We've been talking for a minute. So,
yeah. And definitely shout out to our good friend Rob Terrell for kind of matchmaking and putting us together. And he's a wonderful guy. And I know we both appreciate that. So, for those of you who are not familiar with Mathieu's work, he is a phenomenal portrait photographer, I'd say event photographer, graphic designer. You do so many different things and you do them very well, as evidenced by winning 2 Grammy Awards and it just, three Grammy Awards. Oh, as Mathieu leans over to the side to show me the the Three Musketeers. So, if you're on an elevator and somebody doesn't know you and you've got that, couple moments for the elevator speech and somebody says, "Hey, what do you do?" How do you even begin to answer that?
I say, hey, you want to grab dinner so we can talk about
We're going to need more time.
Not enough. But I see everything as one, so I just say I'm a creative, and because I see directing, producing, designing, photographing, editing, all the things that I do as just kind of one ball, it's just one thing. And, you throw that ball hard enough against the wall, it's going to spark and all kinds of things are going to happen. So I would say primarily, these days I see myself primarily as a photographer, but I'm doing all these other things that I love. So there's nothing that I'm doing because I have to do it at this point in my career. I'm 52 now, and I feel like that's quite a great accomplishment for me to be able to decide, what I do in my life and the people that I work with and the people that I don't work with, and as you would imagine, that happens a little more and more where people reach out. They might not be something that I'm passionate about. I'm completely passion driven since I was a little kid. It's all been about following my passion and, absolute dreamer. And I think for the first big chunk of my career, nobody believed that my dreams could, well, not nobody. My mom did, my, family did for sure. But I think a lot of people just like, oh, here he goes again, talking about, this Phantom of the Paradise movie that he's going to do a project on someday. Oh, here he goes talking about Prince, who he's going to work with someday. And oh my God, he's talking about, his friend Lenny Kravitz that, he probably doesn't know. And, I had so much of that coming up and friends from high school who were like telling other people, yeah, this guy's like, he's pathological. He thinks he's doing all these things, but he doesn't know any of these people. And so for me, it hurt, and at the same time it was a driver, to kind of make all of these dreams come true. But the dreams were not so much about working with the person, it was experiencing the person. If there's somebody that I'm a big fan of and then suddenly I get to go to the shows for free and I get to, document and get paid for it eventually, and establish deep friendships with artists that I admire, people that I respect. It just seems like the thing that they saw in me is that passion. It happens. I mean, to this day, I'll be with somebody and talking about music or talking about film or, and they're looking at me like, okay, you're a white French Jewish guy, like grew up in Paris, moved to LA. how the hell do you know all this stuff? And how the hell do you have all this? How the hell do you have all this stuff? You know, because I'm a big collector since I was a kid. So it all kind of makes sense. And I feel like the laws of attraction that follow passion bring me to every one of these things. I mean, it just happened again recently with an artist that I really, was digging, a new artist, and then listening to it and saying, I gotta work with this person. Like she's amazing. This singer Ray, I don't know if you've heard of her, but
Mhm,
and
yeah,
then
yes.
literally the day I say that, I end up in a party in Paris and she walks up to me. She's like, you seem like a cool guy. What's your name? I'm like, Matthew. Hi, I'm Ray. I'm like, okay, I was just saying this today, not knowing what part of the world she might be in, so
Wow.
and that's happened over and over, which leads me to believe that the universe, if you truly are passionate and your dreams are always, you know, it's always possible. I mean, of course, maybe like if I dreamt of like marrying Monica Bellucci, maybe that doesn't happen, but there's
Maybe
certain
it
things,
does.
maybe you never know. We're still here. Sorry, Grace, my
Ah,
girlfriend. But my point being that things that are, possible always seem possible. There's certain things that people will set out to do and just be like, but why am I wasting my time? I also
yeah.
had those moments, but I want to only be able to work with Leica cameras, when I couldn't afford barely a Canon, and then, now I'm a Leica ambassador. I just got back from the 100-year celebration in Germany. So it just seems like, there's some thread that tells me I'm on the right path. There's still so much to accomplish, but that's a very long-winded answer to your question. But that also kind of represents who I am. It's hard to just, answer that in a short way.
Well, let me read to you a quote from your very new book, Paris Blues. And the quote is, I think I was born a surrealist. The impossible seemed more plausible than the possible. And, there's a lot of ways to either interpret or summarize that. But one way potentially is if you dream it, it's possible.
Yeah.
And you're living proof of that from the time when you were a kid going to flea markets in Paris looking for R&B and soul records.
Yeah. I was there a week ago with my son Julian. So I'm still doing that, every time I'm in Europe, I'm gonna end up in Paris at the flea market. I'm gonna make sure there's a Sunday in there. But yeah, I mean, surrealism is also a big part of my passion in my life. I'm a big, big fan of, I have a Dada tattoo. I don't know if you're familiar with the Dadaists,
Mhm.
this
Yes, yes. Yep.
movement started in 1916 in Zurich with Tristan Zara. I'm a big, big fan of that. The art, Marcel Duchamp, we got a tattoo here. Max Ernst, like I got all the surrealists. I even have a little Picasso dachshund because I have a little
Oh,
wiener dog.
wow.
But my passion really is deep for the arts, obviously. Growing up in Paris, that helps. My parents being art collectors, my dad especially being obsessed with art to the point that he would not be able to pay the rent for 2 months because he just bought a painting, just which I learned some of those bad habits from him too. But I think surrealism is also the thing that makes it possible. I guess that's what I'm saying in that part of the book, is that, sometimes you look at two lines, and I'm looking at these two lines, and if I look at them long enough and I want them to be a circle, I'm going to see the circle. I don't know if that makes sense,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of things that just seem like there is no way in hell I could get to what I want. There's no way in hell that I'm going to be able to work with, my favorite comedian of all time that I used to like, would literally, if Chappelle's show was on TV, uh I would skip going to a friend's birthday party because there's no way I'm missing the new Chappelle show episode. You know what I mean? And
Oh,
now
yeah.
I am. So I mean, it's just all this stuff just seem like crazy, but at the same time plausible. And I just found something I showed Dave 2 days ago. I was in Ohio. I just got back last night for Chappelle summer camp. And I found, when Facebook shows you those reminders, and I almost have to find the screenshot because I just took a screenshot of it because it's so crazy with what we're saying. So this is on May 6, 2009, right?
Okay.
And this is my Facebook status, and it says Mathieu Bitton because it used to be like Mathieu Bitton and then is, in the
Oh,
older
yeah.
days. book. Mathieu Bitton is digging through the sticks and stones looking for store-bought bones. You can't buy what you can't find, baby. Back to Prince music and Chappelle skits now. Now,
Wow,
Chappelle ended up with a special called Sticks and Stones. I'm
that's
talking about
crazy.
Prince music. I'm talking about Chappelle shows. That's weird. I can't explain that. That's a random, thing that I write that I write on Facebook or whatever. So, go explain that to somebody. That's the laws of attraction. I remember Prince used to be really into that Secret. Remember the Secret? And,
Hmm.
and it's funny because Prince, being so against bootlegging, used to bootleg the Secret DVD and hand it out to people.
Ironically,
So
yeah.
I still have one of those. I also have the Sly and the Family Stone pirate VHS tapes that Prince put together. It's just kind of funny. I love the irony and hypocrisy of it all. It kind of makes it like a real artist always have a little bit of that. Uh,
Well,
do do as I
something that
say, not as I do.
something that I really sort of connected with you in a sense is, we're talking about how you would check out the flea markets when you were 9 and 10 years old. So when I was 10 years old, I was listening to Lou Rawls, Peaches and Herb, Miles Davis, a group called Blue Magic,
Yeah,
all that, and very much into R&B. Early days going to see Luther Vandross in concert as a kid, and what kind of struck me, not only reading what you did and going through my own history and then seeing the things that you've done, is I think it's indicative of somebody who's a deep thinker. And
mhm.
by that I mean there's things that just really grab you. And whether they are something that would grab your peers or not, they grab you. And that's what
Yeah,
matters. And you kind of evolve that thought in your mind, which leads you to collect things. It leads you to dream big and
right.
ultimately do those things. I mean, do you sort of connect with that idea in hindsight of maybe being a deeper thinker as a kid? And you maybe were too young then to realize that?
I mean, I think so. My friends were always a lot older. I mean, I was so weird to my friends because I like going to the Paris Opera when I was a kid. I like,
Okay.
the flea markets I couldn't miss. So if it was a friend's birthday party or something, I'm going to be late because I'm going to come after the flea market. Reading and becoming obsessed with the Henry Millers and the Allen Ginsbergs and the
Oh,
Kerouacs,
wow.
all the beat poets and everything, which that got really, it was more of a thing when I was 14 and moved to the States, but definitely was so into like Verlaine and Rimbaud and Baudelaire, and I was
Oh,
obsessed
wow.
with those guys. And I talk in the book about how I used to always hang out at Shakespeare and Company, and there was nobody my age. Like there was
No.
no ever anybody my age when I was like 9, 10, 11, hanging out in that store. Uh, and the owner be so weird, famously would, like, instead of cutting his hair, would grab a candle and set his hair on fire and just put it. But so a lot of my friends just thought I was strange. I was listening to classical music. I was obsessed with the classical music as a kid, so I wasn't really into the Mickey Mouse crap and all. I mean, it's
Sure.
great. It's great for, but
Just wasn't
uh
your thing.
and if I was into kids' books, it was like The Little Prince because it has an element of surrealism and realizing your dream. Saint-Exupéry, the author, was someone who grew up with really bad luck and just kind of a lot of rough things in his childhood, develops this kind of fantasy world, and connects with this little prince character. So that to me was definitely where I went, and but usually it was just adult stuff. I was into, not adult, maybe a little bit of
Understood.
that too at a certain point, maybe, but but the deep thinker thing, I was also exposed to really deep literature, with from my parents, and but also my father collected, Frank Herbert books. So I read a lot of those, Dune books, and my favorite one called The White Plague. I read that stuff early. My sister was an avid reader. I think I talk in the book about ripping the last page of her
Mhm.
books because she wanted to play with me. All she wanted to do
Yes.
was these like goggle-sized glasses. So I would go and sneak and rip the last pages of all the books. and I'd hear her screaming, when she would get to the last page and didn't know what happens at the end of Anna Karenina. It's like
That's such a brother move to do. That is
it
definitely
is.
what a
It is.
brother would do.
Yeah, she threw a knife at me once. She was so mad. It had a holster on it, but it fell out and stabbed me in the knee. But I deserved it. It wasn't too
you,
bad.
you had it coming. So
I had it.
so you're 9 and you're at the flea markets. You're 14 and you move to California, and then ultimately go cross country to NYU to study
19, yeah,
journalism.
when I was
How
19.
did what were the sort of connective tissue that got you to LA and then to New York?
Well, I was living with my mom and stepfather that I didn't love, so I kind of wanted to go be independent. And so I basically, as soon as I could, I applied to schools out there. I got into NYU, got into Columbia. I don't even remember how I got into Columbia. All I know is I have somewhere a letter of acceptance, but it was even crazier and more expensive than NYU. So
Oh my
couldn't
gosh,
do
I can
it. And,
imagine.
and I paid my NYU loans for like, I think 15 years after I graduated,
Sure.
But New York was always a fantasy of mine. And I had family in New York, cousins, my mom's cousin. And then I had a separate family, which is I dedicated my book to a woman named Roxanne Lowitt,
I saw that. Yes.
who was a great, legendary photographer, who was really the first backstage photographer, the first person that Christian Dior and Yves Saint Laurent, those people let backstage was Roxanne, and then it became a thing. And so Roxanne found my first apartment on 13th Street. And that's where I went a lot for dinners and lunches, and so that was my New York mom. I called her my New York mom, and her daughter Vanessa. We were in boarding school together in France before I moved to the U.S. And the first time I went to New York when I was 11 was with Vanessa, and so Roxanne had already been in my life, as my New York mom, and so I knew that I would be fine in New York, have people to fall back on. But what happened is I went to school, but I just started working instantly when I wasn't in class. I was working
Mhm.
and started doing the flea markets in New York, and my vinyl collection blew up in the early New York days because I would find a lot of gems.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I lived on 26 between 6th and Broadway, and the old flea market was 25th and 26th Street and 6th Avenue. So I lived above the flea market basically.
Oh,
So as
that's like
soon as the
heaven.
guys loaded in at like 6 a.m., I'd be down looking at records and finding like rare Shuggy Otis and Parliament Funkadelic
Oh my
and
God,
all the stuff
amazing.
I love. And incidentally, I just left George Clinton yesterday in Ohio. He
Oh,
was so it is weird, how things just kind of always full circle in my life. But so yeah, so New York was the escape, and then that's kind of where everything started for me, where I started my business, where I started graphic design. I started photography, but I was too insecure to. I was living with my roommates were photographers and they were really good. So I never really thought I could be a real photographer. So that was a hobby, for a long time. But yeah, New York was definitely for me was definitely the school of life
well,
where I
and
learned
and you and I both have an appreciation, certainly, for New York and just the energy that city has. And so, you live in California. I know you spend a pretty decent amount of time in New York, and not to mention everywhere else. But, how would you describe as a photographer kind of the energy or the vibe that you get when you're in LA versus New York? I mean, I feel they both have energy, but I feel like it's a different energy. And the same thing could be said for Paris or for that matter, Tanzania or anywhere you go. Different places have energy, but for those listening who may not be as familiar with the worldwide places, what kind of feeling do you get when you're in those two cities, and is it different?
Well, I'll put it like this. LA, there's a lot of photographers, meaning there's a lot of guys who have cameras strapped around their necks. I don't see them using it as much as I do in New York. New
Yeah.
York, you really see a lot of people. I mean, granted, New York's got more stuff going on, but even when I'm in downtown LA, I don't really see people unless they're doing a specific shoot. I don't see people as much. And there's also an element of celebrities that have especially with Leica, people, these things are
Sure.
so beautiful. People want to have one around their necks. Like, so you see that they're carrying him. They're not always, shooting. I go out in the mountains here. I live in Malibu, and almost every day when I'm home, I just got home last night, so I'm still editing photos from the past week, but I haven't gone yet. But I'm in the mountains with my camera every single day shooting nature, whatever it is. I've been very inspired by nature this year. And so to me, if you have these things, you got to use them, and I'm also a collector of Leicas, and that's another disease, but it's good investments. It's not like I'm gonna start collecting Labubus and hopefully this one will be worth 100 grand, and then 3 years
Sure.
from now, 25 cents, kind of like NFTs. But so yeah, so I see New York as more of a photographer's town. Paris, even more, Paris. Obviously, I just did a whole book about Paris, but Paris is just so stunning visually everywhere you go. Almost everywhere you go, it's gotten a little rough, but certain areas. But there's certain cities that are just going to inspire photography more. If you're, in Barcelona, you might be much more inspired than, I don't know, if you're in Montreux, even though Montreux is legendary, aside from the jazz festival, might not be as cool. But if you go in the mountains, then it's beautiful and you can get
Mhm.
beautiful landscapes. But walking around the city, it's like if I'm in Dayton, I'm not really like shooting everywhere,
Right.
but Yellow Springs, Dave's bringing a lot of great artists who are shooting a lot, doing a lot of stuff. But and then I go in the forest there every day and shoot amazing waterfalls and things. It's been a weird therapeutic thing I've been doing this year. Like, going in the forest and just capturing nature and trying to do things that don't look like things I've seen with nature. So it's nice to have a challenge, but yeah, I think LA, like, LA is a place where people drive Ferraris but don't have money to pay, for a house or apartment and crash at their
Yeah.
friend's house, but they want to drive around in the Ferrari. So it's a little different, it's the soul, I live here, but I live by the beach, which I really love, but the soul of New York City, the soul of Paris, the soul of Barcelona, even London, there's like a lot more soul in those cities to me, and that inspires photography more than here. Here you go specifically shoot someone.
Right. Right. Right.
I have a shoot with this person on the beach, or I'm gonna go shoot this guy at this venue, or this guy at his house, or downtown at the Figueroa Hotel. The specific things. It's not as much about walking around and capturing moments, but it's doable anywhere, obviously.
Yeah, I lived for 3 years in the Wilshire La Brea area,
Mhm.
sort of near the tar pits, that kind of general
Yeah,
area, Hancock Park area,
Camera
and
Museum and all that.
yeah, and I liked it because at some
But no,
point that
not
was
there.
what's
Sorry,
that?
not there. But what's the car museum? The
Oh, the Peterson.
Peterson, yeah.
Yeah, that was still part of, I guess I would call it like old Hollywood.
Right.
And then, like anything, once it's knocked down and rebuilt or shined up, it doesn't have that same kind of vibe like a New York has. I mean,
Yeah, what's yeah,
New York has
Starbucks.
brand new buildings, but plenty of older stuff that's just classic. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So from a standpoint of shooting, when I talk to a lot of photographers, and let's say they shoot one particular genre, whether it's wildlife or it's sports or it's portraiture, they enjoy photography so much that when they're not at work, they like shooting something completely different, just to kind of energize them. Do you have something that's not sort of your day to day that kind of reinvigorates you, or are you just happy to shoot anything and it really doesn't get monotonous for you?
Well, that's what I'm talking about with the nature stuff. Like I've
Okay.
I've been doing some really weird waterfall shoots
Yeah.
that don't look like really waterfalls, but I've been playing around with that. I was in Hawaii for Christmas and New Year, and was really inspired by Hawaii, Kauai especially,
Okay.
and it was my first time there. So that's kind of when I got the bug of like wanting to shoot nature in a kind of unique, black and white way. And so doing some interesting stuff. It looks like sci-fi, like the stuff I've been doing kind of looks like maybe looks like AI did it.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
But it's all, and I've been I've been buying a lot of like 1930s lenses, 40s, 50s, 60s. So I'm working on different projects where I'm finding some really rare lenses and specifically shooting certain things with those lenses. And they have such a unique look. And so that's kind of been the challenge for me is to come up with this new combination of camera lens for specific things, and water seems to be the thing that inspires me the most this year.
Are you shooting the M11 with some of those vintage lenses or different
All,
bodies?
all M11 monochrome.
Okay, okay.
That's the only thing I've shot so far on this nature stuff.
So as I
Only
mentioned,
monochrome.
I was at the Leica 100th event in New York City, and having an M11, I thought I have absolutely no need for the M11 100th anniversary New York edition. Well, yep. As Mathieu holds up his New York
Number
edition,
73.
I'm 44.
Oh, nice. 44. 73 is my year, but actually that's funny. I think I asked for like five different numbers.
Okay.
44 was one of them. That's a good number.
Well, I'll ask you, then I'll certainly tell you why was 44 good for you.
It's always just been a good number for me. The
Okay.
fours. Yeah, any combination of fours has always been like a good. I know in China it's like death,
Oh
but
gosh.
in my world, 44 is 55. 44 has always been really good. 40,
Okay.
44, 17, and 73 are like kind of my three lucky numbers. Yeah.
Well,
What about you?
when I was talking
You were
to
born in 1944?
no, no. We are close in age, my friend, not 40. No, but I was talking with Rob, who manages the New York Leica store, and I said, this was when I got back to Baltimore, and I called him the next day, and I thought they're probably sold out, but I said, any chance you have any left? He said, well, I got a couple. I said, well, what number? He said, well, I got 17, I got 44. I said, I'll take it
Right.
instantly. So I played college baseball and my
Okay.
number was 44.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So
That's cool.
yeah, so that was not only very cool, but it was also in part my
Meaningful.
rationalization for getting it.
It was meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool.
Super meaningful to have that, and New York, USA, and it's just an absolutely beautiful looking camera. And so here's a Leica specific question, and I think I have some ideas around this, but as someone like yourself, an ambassador for the brand and a collector, my take is that I can't think of any, maybe there's some, but any other brands where people tend to collect the cameras and not sell the old one that they used to have, maybe either to help fund the new one, or they say, why do I need the old version if I get the new one? Leica folks, they will collect it. They will
Oh, yeah.
take great care of it. What do you think it is about Leica? Is it the history, or what do you think?
It's First of all, it's the practicality of the camera. Like I'll give you a perfect example of what you just said. I've been buying a few too many lenses, so I was like, okay, I got to sell some stuff, right?
Okay.
So I pulled out my monochrome type 246, the M monochrome
Right.
246, and which is an amazing camera. And I was like, it's in great condition. I always keep my cameras in really good condition. I got the box, I got the things, I got extra
Oh yeah.
battery. I'll sell that just to offset, a couple of the lenses or
Sure.
one of the lenses.
Right. Right. Exactly.
And then, I'm like packing it up. I was gonna put on my story like, hey, you want my monochrome? That shot a lot of stuff from my first book, Darker Than Blue, blah blah blah. And then I was like, oh, but that one does video, and the new monochromes don't do video. I can't sell it. So there's
Of course
always
not.
like something where I'm like, I have some of the same lenses. Like I have the Apo 50 in black chrome and in black paint, and I'm like, I don't need those two lenses, but I collect black paint. And that black paint one, has gotten so rare that, I'll keep that in my storage space where I have, rare stuff and then shoot the black chrome one, and even though that would pay for every lens I've bought in the past 2 years, probably, I still, I collect this stuff. They're so beautiful. The patina on the black paint stuff, the more you use it, it's so beautiful. So I think it's that. And I think the same way as like, okay, I got two SL3Ss for work, right? When I shoot shows, it's SL3S. I got an SL3, I got an SL2S. Okay, SL2S, I was fine trading in, for partially or whatever for SL3S because it's the same camera, just same resolution and everything.
Hmm.
SL3 I was going to get rid of, and then I'm like, no, because if I want the 60 megapixels for the job, if I'm doing a movie poster or something, then I'm going to use that. So there's always a reason with lenses. You know, there I have maybe I have like 12 50 millimeter lenses, maybe more, Why? Because each one has its own look, it's you can't to somebody who doesn't understand this stuff, they might be like, all right, you're ridiculous. Just because the bokeh, what the fuck is bokeh? You know what I
Right.
mean? Because it's a little more swirly on this lens and a little more bubbly on this one. And it's
Yeah.
yes, exactly. Yes. I it's just the way I am. I like taking, especially now that I'm doing this nature stuff, the bokeh is like the whole thing,
Hmm.
it's so and then, there's a few of us out there that they're competitive with collecting. I'm not
Sure.
talking about my friend Kevin Fickling, but who show up to the like 100 years with, museum pieces. So I had to like up
Yes.
one of my museum pieces and brought this gold M2 prototype. Uh, and then but that also kind of makes it fun, because
Yeah.
we're all friends and we all support one another. And there's even I'll give you an example like this, like a community. Do you know who Terry LaRue is?
Only by name.
Yeah, so Terry's a really, really brilliant, like a true artist. Like he really is a true artist. And, he's been dealing with some chronic pain disorder for a long time. The guy's like, it's not an easy life, and he found his medicine in photography, right? And had a great show. Like he's very unique. The guy like builds all his own stuff, prints all his own stuff, does all this. And as an example of this community, like when I think I posted a couple of these nature photos, these water things, because I was like, this is so weird. I wonder if people will, react to it.
Mhm.
Or so I was kind of curious, posted some stuff. And Terry hits me up. He's like, man, these are amazing. Uh, I want to print some from you in this platinum palladium prints, which is very expensive prints.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man, that would be amazing. Let me know what it'll cost, blah, blah, blah. I would love to see what that looks like. Ends up making these beautiful prints, ships them to me, just like out of the kindness of his heart, and that's something to me where I don't remember when I was a Canon shooter, somebody, I'll show you just because it's literally right here. But this, I don't ever remember, the kind of thing where like you need something, you talk about Rob Terrell, like if I need something, he'll find it. It doesn't matter,
Yes. Yep.
you know, it's not in the store, he'll find it. Like here's one of the prints that he
Oh,
did on this.
that's amazing. That's beautiful.
I shot
Wow.
it in the little forest in Yellow Springs, Ohio, in the Glen Helen. So
Such a beautiful photo.
amazing,
That
right?
is
This
super cool.
little baby red-tailed hawk, and then this is what I mean when I say it's almost like tie-dye or sci-fi, but this is a waterfall. Like you might not realize that's a waterfall.
No, no. I definitely if you did not tell me, I would not know that was a
And
waterfall.
there's no trickery, there's no, Photoshop whatsoever. I'll show you just one more. But I mean, like he made these. I just thought that was so sweet of him. Like that's water.
That's yeah. Well, and yeah, and in monochrome it looks incredible, especially.
Yeah, so it's shot in monochrome. So anyway, that's I wanted to give him a shout out because we're talking about this community.
Yeah.
But a lot of friends like I've made a whole other family with like initially my friend Kieran Karnani, who was the one who really like helped me. Stefan Kyle in Germany brought me into the company, very, very supportive to this day, still very supportive. Kieran's no longer with the company. Uh, Now I work with, I don't know if you know Mary Irene, who's great,
Yeah.
who's like it's a community of people who, if you're doing work they love, obviously, or they appreciate or they know represents the brand, they're really gonna go to bat for you. That I think we just really experienced this in Wetzlar with the 100-year celebration last week. Maybe now it's the previous week. I don't have a sense of time. I've been around really around the world lately, but um, everybody coming together, having so much fun that even though we're exhausted, we're jet lagged, we're still all hanging out till 4 in the morning, in the hotel lobby or the hotel bar, and we're all geeking out our cameras and we're all in the shop buying stuff. I bought something at the auction, you know, sitting with my friend and another major collector, Jason Momoa, who's a major Leica collector, can afford stuff I can't afford. I should have been a superhero, damn it.
You
Uh,
really you really should have. What were you thinking?
but so much fun to experience that, all together and just to just be doing it for the love of a camera brand. When have you ever heard of, like, you know what I mean, of this kind of thing?
It doesn't happen.
Go across the world for cameras and spend 3 days with people and sleep in, you know, random hotels, whatever, because
Yeah.
we're all there.
Well,
Pretty cool.
so speaking of New York, I was in New York. This was, I don't know, tail end of last year, I want to say, and maybe the beginning of this year. And at the Leica store, they had a copy of your book, Paris Blues, a signed copy. And I thought, well, I'm definitely not leaving the store without it. The mistake I made is I bought the book after I left the hotel, went to the Leica store, then walked around for 3 hours
With
instead
the
of
book,
buying the book before I got back to the hotel because that is a big, heavy book
it is
to
heavy
walk
book. I'm
around.
sorry. I'm sorry. I would have definitely recommended leaving it at the store and picking it up after. But I appreciate you grabbing it though.
So my question is, it's a beautiful book. It's just simply beautiful, and it almost to a viewer, it looks like it has, and maybe it's more than two, but at least two components. You have components of photos of Paris, and then you have photos of portraits of people in Paris generally, celebrities, actors, musicians, etc. But what was kind of the, aside from Paris, what was the early seed of the idea to do a book based in Paris, about Paris, people photographed in Paris? What got you to want to put that together? Because it's remarkable.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for that compliment. Is I did put a lot of work into it and a lot of thought into it. So, the thing is, people always, like, I've done now two Leica exhibitions that I've traveled. Paris Blues is the current one, which is going to keep traveling. Uh, People always say we want to do a show of your celebrity photography, and I have no interest in a show of celebrity photography. Like, the concept of celebrity when I was 16 blew my mind. Now it's a blessing and a curse, as we know. And celebrity in this day and age doesn't mean anything. You can be a celebrity for a sex tape, you could be a celebrity for uh, who you dated,
Mm-hmm.
and you could be a celebrity for some scandal or some drama or you know, getting away with killing someone on PCH in a car accident and whatever. I mean, like,
You're right.
the things that people obsess on, and that's why I mentioned that Labubu thing earlier. It's like blowing my mind how obsessed people are over this stupid thing. And good for the guy who created it, I guess already made $20 billion off of it.
Wow.
But now you see, oh, there's a Travis Scott collab, there's a Uniqlo collab. Like, everybody just jumps into these things, and that's how I see the concept of celebrity. So when they say, hey, just do a show of celebrities. I'm like, celebrity, no. The celebrities that are my friends that I work with that happen to be celebrities, but are my collaborators, are my friends, and musicians I respect, actors I respect, that makes sense. But it's also not going to be just a show of that so far in my career. So I was thinking about what could I do where, you know, Lenny Kravitz and I have been talking about doing a book. I did a Rizzoli book with him, but that I designed and art directed with my photos and a bunch of pretty much career photographers that he had shot with. And so we've been talking about doing a book. So I was like, okay, maybe I do that next. And then I was like, well, I'm not really ready for that one, even though I have probably a million. I'm not exaggerating. I must have at least a million photos of Lenny over the years because I toured with him for a decade. I still pop in and go, shoot shows or hang out or shoot, for whatever, singles. Um, so I was sitting around at home and I was thinking about what's an expression that means something to me that I haven't fully explored yet. And automatically, the first thing that came in my mind was I need to write a love letter to Paris because I left Paris, in 1987 when I was 14. And I go back a lot, but I feel like Paris gave me all of my inspiration. Everything that I love, everything that I do started in Paris as a kid. And so component at first, I was like, I want to do a book on the Paris flea market. And then I was like, okay, that's definitely a big chapter because I should do a Paris Lenny chapter. And then I started thinking, well, there's all this street photography I've been shooting for 15 years over there. Um, so it should be maybe it's just street photography. And then as I started kind of, you puzzle the thing out, I started thinking, oh, I should do where it's morning, noon, afternoon, evening. As you go through the book, it's kind of like going through the day. And so nighttime is like, we're at Lenny's house, we're at this concert, we're, just kind of in the chaufferie, the boiler room at Lenny's house. So just things started like making sense to me. And then it's the late, late night, and you have Mick Jagger, at 4 a.m., the day that we all found out about COVID and everybody
Oh,
dispersed and went back to the States. Um, it was like February 28th, I think, like, right before the whole thing blew up.
yeah.
And so it just kind of started kind of laying this thing out. And then I was just like, okay, this makes sense to me. And I would also love to write about it. I like writing. And so I was like, I'd love to write a love letter to Paris. And so then I was piecing it together and feeling like, okay, what's the element that's missing? And I was like, oh, it has to be a mirror reflection of my life. So now I have to restructure the whole thing where it's like, what do I do? What's my day like? Right. So
Hmm.
my day might start at, I might be coming back from a show or party or something at 5 a.m. So it might start there and then end going to the catacombs, in over there. And so as I started pulling photos together from like literally like 30,000 images or something I went through,
Wow.
you know, I started feeling like so nostalgic. I started like very getting really emotional about
Hmm.
Paris and my childhood. And, in the process, my father has Alzheimer's now.
Hmm.
And so I was thinking like, how do I pay tribute to him in the book, but without being too obvious about it? He's in the book. There's a picture of him like sticking his tongue out at the Serge Gainsbourg house. And it started to feel like, oh, this is kind of sad, but the images will work it out. The real photographs will work it out. And I was sitting with my girlfriend and I'm like, what do you call something like this? And she's like, Paris Blues, your
Oh,
favorite movie,
wow.
Sidney Poitier film, Paul Newman, Sidney Poitier film that I watch all the time, with the Duke Ellington soundtrack. And I'm like, oh, that's it. That's it. In that way, I'm also paying tribute to that movie. And so once she gave me that time, once she had the idea of Paris Blues, it all started getting exciting. And I'm like, okay, now this is my story, technically. It's like my world.
Hmm.
And so now the celebrity thing makes sense because I'm at fashion shows, I'm at after parties, I'm at concerts, I'm backstage, I'm in their house, I'm in the car with everything just kind of fell together where I was like, Paris Blues it's like a movement of my own life, it's like a kind of concerto. And so I really felt like so proud of it by the time I finished it. And Stefan Kyle, who I mentioned, who's the first person to bring me into Leica, I I had worked with Tenoyas on Lenny's flash book that I designed, and I really like their books. And I've yes, they're all over, but I love the Elliot Erwitt books that they've done, and so many
Gorgeous
other.
books.
And then I got my friend Phil Penman's
Oh,
book
of
and
course.
Alan Schaller. Just kind of like they've put out these amazing books on these guys. And so I asked him if he could put me in touch with Tenoyas, and he set it up, and I had one Zoom, and my whole point was like, I got to be prepared and sharp and get some sleep because I never sleep, and I got to like convince them to put my book out. I really want to do this book with them before I go to other publishers and literally I got on Zoom and I was like, "Hey guys," talking to this guy and Roman, and within like 2 minutes, I was like, "So here's what I'm thinking. I hope you guys." He's like, "Oh, we already want to do it. You don't have to convince us. We're doing it." I was like,
Nice.
"Wait, I don't have to pitch you. I don't have to." They're like, "No, we really want to work with you. So, what's the book?" So they didn't even really like. They were like ready to do my book
That's
regardless of.
great.
Really cool. And so I was very, very grateful for that. And then Naomi Campbell, who's an old friend, wrote a foreword for me, which is, if you know Naomi and how busy she is, that's a feat, to
Yeah.
get her to write a foreword. And she mentions Roxanne Lloyd in it too, because that's how I originally met her.
Mhm.
And so it just felt like an autobiography in a way through images. There's you got that little bit of text to understand who I am, and I think I did a good job with that. And my ex mother of my children, Rebecca, helped me edit that because, she's a great writer and sometimes it's just hard to focus on my
Mhm.
own story. So there's things that, just like my son Miles, really helped me edit the photos because once I turned it in the book, I had no blank pages. There was no white pages whatsoever because I had to fit as many photos as I could fit. And
Okay.
then always got back to me and like, it's amazing, we should probably have some breathing room in the book, like a few
Yep.
white pages, and I'm like fighting it. And so Miles came over. He's also a great photographer. He's a Leica guy too. He got started with me when he was 12, assisting me. So he's really good. And he started on the MP. So, he's like
Oh,
native, like
wow.
never shot
Nice.
with anything else. I wish I could say that. And so he was like, "Yeah, this photo, it's okay." I was like, "What are you talking about? You don't know, you don't understand photography, but
Right.
you're
Of
a kid.
course.
This one that you just, I see why you like that because it looks cool, but it's not really part of the story." And you just kind of like slashed, maybe 15, 20 photos out of the book. And I was kind of trying to hide how upset I was. But then now, when I see the book and I added these quotes from all my favorite authors and people, which I felt like helped kind of tell the Paris story because it's not just my story, it's the story of Paris. And so through these quotes of beloved authors and musicians and historical figures, I thought it just really helped drive the point home.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's interesting because I had a book of my Cuba photography published 2 years ago, and thank goodness I had an editor actually in Los Angeles who was so great because we get attached to the photos because we like them, we think maybe they're good photos, but we also remember the context where we took the picture, what was going on, either literally with the picture or in our lives at the time, and we can build a picture to be in a sense better than it is to an objective observer. So it's like you need somebody to kind of give you another perspective.
Yeah, and even some of the celebrity things, it's just like I have to have this picture in there because it's this person. And he's like, "Yeah, but the picture's not good enough to be in the book." And then I had to agree with that.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
it's about I got a photo of Tilda Swinton, whatever, but it's not that great of a photo. It's just that it's her,
Right,
and
right.
in the book. So I feel like that also helped me for the next book that I do, whatever that is, to come into it with just really looking at quality, the quality first.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. I was thinking about when I finished the book that I mentioned,
I
I
got to
couldn't
check
even
that out.
I
Is it
couldn't
on
even
Amazon?
think of another book because I was just like, oh, I gotta relax for a minute. And so people will say, like, what's the next book? And to me, I'm thinking, I'll let you know when I know. So for you, do you know, or do you need to let a little bit of time and space get between Paris Blues and when those ideas start to percolate again?
The ideas always percolate. There's
Okay.
always stuff. I've written titles of the next books and
Okay.
titles of the shows. I don't know. This stuff that I've been doing, like some of the stuff I showed you, I'm really enjoying. So I'm like, maybe I'll do something with that. But I truly don't know because Paris Blues is going to keep traveling. So I also put so much into the prints, the work, the thing that I want people to see it in more places than just LA and New York, where
Sure.
it's been the two phenomenal openings, they were insane. But I
Yeah.
love for it to travel more. So.
Well,
I'm giving, sorry, I'm doing a master class, my first official Leica master class. I did one in France before, but my first Leica Academy with Todd Heido and Mark DePaula in
oh yeah.
November. It's going to be fun, the three of us together.
Is
That's
that
going
like a whole weekend or how
It's
long does it?
5 days. Yeah,
Yeah.
November 5th through 10th. So it's gonna be a fun one. So that they just announced that this week. So that's just like people can I'll send you the link, whatever, if people want to check it out. But it's just gone up, for registration and for sale. So we'll see how that goes. But with those two guys, that's gonna be really fun. The
Will
two
that be in LA or where?
that's in Paris.
Oh, in
So
Paris. Okay. Okay.
so
Wow.
it's a portraiture master class. So it's gonna be fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and with the three of you, that would be phenomenal. But let me ask you a question that I think I'm certainly really interested to hear your answer, but I think listeners may also glean something from this when photographing loved ones. And specifically, you enjoyed a really great relationship by every appearance with the late Quincy Jones.
Oh man, yeah.
And the parallel, Mathieu, that I'm trying to draw is with you being around him over a very extended period of time, being very much a trusted friend, and being around him in so many different moments, and being able to document moments photographically and kind of give a snapshot, almost, no pun intended, of who this man was. I'm thinking about being a friend of his as you were and making these images. And the parallel is a person who has a loved one and it really enjoys photography and wants to kind of document their loved one the way you documented Quincy, while still being very much of a friend. You weren't there as the official photographer of that get together. It's just who you are. So maybe you can kind of share how you navigated and balanced that. I'm a friend, but I can't help but be a photographer. Kind of how did you walk that walk?
Well, I think, earlier you said event photographer. I definitely don't see myself as an event photographer unless it's those kinds of events,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
If it's Quincy's birthday or obviously Dave,
Yeah,
I with him all the time. Lenny's, birthday. I shot his 50th birthday. Sadly, last year I was in Zanzibar for his 60th, so I didn't make it to Paris. But just always if it's something that I find really interesting. I can't do the red carpet thing. I mean, bless my friends who do that, the patience to do that. Awesome, to each his own.
yeah,
Uh, but I always have a camera, so that's my thing. I'm always going to have one or two cameras on my shoulders, sometimes three. But if I'm going to someone's house, like Quincy's house, something, I'm just going to have one camera. It's not going to be a big camera. It's going to be an M. Back in the day, it was like a deluxe. I would have that because I could fit that in my pocket.
sure.
I just got that new 100-year one, actually. It's really cool. And so I'm there, and, whether we're having dinner or it's a birthday party or whatever it is, there's sometimes going to be an official photographer at the party, but a lot of these places, especially with Quincy, they're very intimate. So they don't really think like they'll just take photos, the kids will take photos or somebody will, and so I have a camera. So, hey guys, I'm happy to take the photos. Happy birthday, Quincy,
Mm-hmm.
like a few years in a row where I was at the birthdays. And so, get Clarence Avant with Jacqueline Avant and Quincy and QD3 and Martina, the Quincy's daughter, is a good friend of mine, and Rashida, and like everybody's there. And so everybody just looks at me like, oh yeah, that's Mathieu with the camera. Like, we don't have to worry about some of these photos if
Sure.
you don't
There's
want to.
no ulterior motive at all.
Yeah, it's just like, hey, I'm here. I'm not charging you. You know what I mean? I'm just
Yeah.
taking these photos. Another great example was because of my extensive collection of black film posters. One day in 2016, Lenny was in town and Kravitz was in town, and he calls me and he says, hey, I'm going, Denzel Washington and I are going over to Sidney Poitier's house. It's his 89th birthday tomorrow.
Oh wow.
We're going to hang at his house, like kind of birthday eve. And hey man, you should come and show him some of your posters. I had met Sydney at my best friend Benjamin Trigano's MNB gallery. He had come in for a Howard Bingham exhibition that I had worked
Okay.
on. And so he had closed the gallery for Sydney. We got to hang out with him. That was like 2006, maybe. But so at this point, Sydney has got dementia. It's a different kind of Sydney.
Hmm.
Uh, so Lenny's like, obviously bring your camera, like, but bring some of your posters. So I go over there, same thing. I got my camera. I'm sitting quietly, and then at some point, Lenny says, oh, Matthew's collects movie posters. He's got a lot of your stuff. And Sydney's very quiet, not really verbal at that point, like just nodding, smiling. His wife is there, Joanna Shimkus. The kids are there. It's just like a very small family thing. And so I start like, oh, well, let me show you this, French Lilies of the Field poster. And let me show you this uh, Lost Man poster. And then as I unfold this The Lost Man movie poster, uh, I realize, oh, it's Sydney and Joanna Shimkus, right? So that's his wife. But in that
Oh,
moment,
wow.
I was like, I didn't realize they were still married. Like I would known they were married, but they met on that movie
Wow.
in 1967 or something. And, they were together since. So as I'm like, oh, this is deep. Like I happen to bring these posters, and there's the wife who's in front of me, who I didn't
Yeah.
know was going to be there, is on the poster, and then it was like the best way I can describe it, because Sydney was kind of slouched on the couch like this, kind of looking, and then all of a sudden it was like a flower, that blooms. He just
Oh, wow.
like
That's
his whole
beautiful.
body. And he says, "Young man," and he starts talking. I'm not joking. The entire family is in tears. The fact that
Oh,
because he came out, he snapped out of that dementia for a minute, starts, just complimenting me on the fact that I have this stuff, and how do I have it, and he's just, it's just like telling stories about the movie set and everything. And I'm looking around the room, everybody like Denzel, nobody's got dry eyes, you know what I mean? And then I say, well, this poster, it's you and your wife, so here, my gift to you, please keep it. And to this day, I've not found another one of those. It was so rare, but whatever, that's what it's about.
sure.
But I went to Quincy's house the second time. I gave him a huge Slender Thread poster from my collection that's still framed in his house now. And so I had this moment, and Sydney gets up, grabs me by the arm, and walks me down this hallway to their little kitchen, like little kitchenette or whatever. And I think he like reached into a cupboard or something and took out some $100 bills. And he's like, here you go. And I was like, no, 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 don't do that. This is a gift is a gift. And then he like looks at me like in a really strange way, and he just like hugged me in his kitchen. And I was like, this is so strange, and surreal, and crazy. So we walk back into the room. I'm showing more stuff. I have an original painting for the Paris Blues movie. So I actually brought the painting with me. Uh, I should actually wait. I'm gonna grab something off the wall because this is real life. Uh, so this is on my wall, but this is the original artwork for the painting of the Slender
Wow.
Thread. So it's two
That's
different two different
that's
versions.
amazing.
You can see the guy, Boris Gasson, was
Hmm.
working out the title on the back. And as you can see, I got Sydney to sign them that night.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
So that, and it's probably not normal podcast behavior to walk away, but
Actually, you'd be surprised. You would, or maybe not be surprised. But no, it's welcome. That's incredible.
like from Budapest, I think. But so this is the Lost Man. This is a different one.
That's
Good, right?
I collect movie posters, and that's so
So
I can relate.
as you see, Sydney signed it.
Yep,
And that was really hard for him to sign at that point
I
because he
could
was
imagine.
Joanna Shimkus. And
Mm.
then I went to Quincy's house and he signed it
Oh,
because he did,
that's
he
awesome.
did he did the score. So So that those are the special, these are the most special things because it's something that I've collected that ends up having a personal story.
Oh
They
yeah.
leave a personal mark on it. Sadly, both Sydney and Quincy are gone, so
Yeah.
to have that in my possession is kind of surreal. But so that's how the camera was the tool that created that story. You know what I mean? I took some amazing photos that night. And then the next day was he invited me to his birthday at Craig's in LA for his 89th. So
Okay.
I got 4 photos that night. And by the time I made it to dinner, I came in with framed photos of all the photos I had shot the night before. I went to
Oh,
the
that's
lab, had
amazing.
everything printed, had everything framed in like one day, and showed up with like presents for the kids, the wife, for Sydney. So that was for Denzel, for Lenny. So that was very special.
Oh my gosh.
And so but that's my passion, taking me there. Another one is a shoot I did with Melvin Van Peebles, the same thing. I was at his apartment in New York, with his grandson and his ex-daughter-in-law, my friend Jamie Kailani, uh, used to be married to Mario, and she was
Okay,
like,
yeah.
she knew what a huge Melvin Van Peebles fan I am and collect all the stuff. And so she was like, well, go with, Marley, her son, go with Marley he's going to visit him. Just go with him, have your camera in a bag. He doesn't really like photographers and stuff like that. He's been burned a lot and blah, blah,
Sure.
blah. And so I hung out for hours and then, talking. And then at first he thought I was conning him because I knew his work so well that he's like, what's this French? But then the fact that I was French, he knew because he lived in France. He wrote, his first movie, La Permission, the story of a 3-day pass, that was done in Paris. And so he was kind of like fighting how impressed he was, like
He
how
was trying to
that
keep it
I
down the
collected all
down
this
low.
stuff because he was like he really thought I was conning him. He thought I'd gone on Google and learned all this stuff, And then at one point he was just like laughing and talking about all this stuff, and he goes, "Motherfucker, I thought you were here to take pictures. Where's your camera?" And I was like, "Well, I was told to keep it in the bag. Fuck that, take my picture." And
I
then for
love it.
hours like hanging and shooting, and then he said I could go around his apartment and grab whatever I wanted off the wall. So I have this, my favorite picture I've ever shot is him, holding a American in Hell, a Spanish book. This The True American in English was the book, but in Europe it's called An American in Hell.
Mm.
So, that again, that story you could never take away. I had a story like that with Dick Gregory. I mean, it's endless,
Some
all
legends.
the titles that I Harry Belafonte and but I've ended up somehow that's why we go back to the laws of attraction. All these things that have been surrounding me on the wall since I was a kid, that things I've been collecting, I end up with those people,
Hmm.
and the camera became the car,
Passport.
yeah, the passport or the vehicle to get me in there, which is kind of amazing.
You
And
know,
and but
when people, so my specialty is shooting professional sports. So I'm shooting Major League Baseball, NFL, football, et cetera. And people will say to me, oh, you've got this long lens, and oh, you're on the field and this and that. It must be so much easier to make great pictures.
that's
Well,
hard.
I know that's not true. So my question to you in the context of some of the things that you're doing is around the subject of access. So by building these relationships and by being very sincere as a person and very genuine in how you're very careful and appropriate and just very kind of go with the flow, read the room. So through all of that and these friendships, yes, you have access that people would not have. However, that's not what makes a great photo. So
No,
maybe, when you're backstage and Dave is performing either before a show or after a show, I don't know his particular routine, but when he is in what would be a I'll call it working moment, he's not on stage
but
and you have access, meaning you're allowed in the room. But after that, where do you compose and choose moments and become like a fly on the wall to be able to create really compelling images that access is but one very small part of?
I mean, I see it as like floating around the room. I see it as
Yeah.
like, this big dude, but I feel like I'm transparent when I'm shooting. I feel like it's like a invisibility cloak, that a lot of times people are like, or even Dave would be like, "When did you get that picture? I don't remember you being there. You know, like I really didn't see you." And I'm a, 6'3", 300 pound dude. So it's like, um, I think instinct is the greatest gift for a photographer. And I hate to say it, but if you have bad instinct, choose something else because uh, a lot of times you're just gonna really have to follow almost like invisible energy uh that is pulling you in different directions. So I have that a lot with concerts. Like I don't know why, but in this very moment, something's calling me to the left side of the stage.
Mm,
Yet the guy's over there. And next thing I know, he's running down to that side, and boom, I got the shot with the guitar or whatever. So it's instinct. And, you know, obviously if you're shooting the same artist, you start developing, their,
yeah.
where they're gonna be, or he might be at this place. But uh it's still unpredictable. And somebody like Dave is still, it's actually harder than to me because how do you make photos interesting of someone standing on stage? You know what I mean? And so that's a challenge too of getting, cooler angles or more interesting silhouettes and um but backstage moments, conversation. He's always in this deep conversation, talk about deep thinker. This guy's like the smartest guy I've ever met.
Yeah. Brilliant.
You know, uh you'd be like blown away some of the conversations we've had or he'll have with someone else. And so the intensity of a moment is also when you capture. And then there's moments where my camera is never turning on. You know, there's moments where I see that this moment is so precious that it should only be memorized by the people who are in the room. This is only a moment for those who are there. This is not a
Mhm.
moment that other people should ever experience, whether it's video or stills. And so that's something that I've learned. I've definitely over the years taken the photo I shouldn't have taken, not intentionally, but just being like, oh, this is cool. And then somebody's like, whoa, 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 don't do that. So you learn that too.
Mhm.
And so now I follow my instincts. So, there was a party that Nipsey Hussle had at the Peppermint Club in LA, and Dave's DJ Trauma was DJing that party, so we all went there. And I get there and it's Jay-Z and Snoop Dogg and T.I. and obviously Nipsey and I mean like, all the guys. And I had my camera on my shoulder, and Nipsey has this photographer who I just saw in Ohio. Jen J is a great photographer. She was his photographer. So in the moment, I'm like, this is Nipsey's party. He's got his photographer here. I'm with Dave, but if Dave wants a photo or whatever, I'll take it. But I kept having this voice in my head that was like, just keep it down, just no pictures. So I never took a photo that night. Maybe a week later, it seemed like in my memory, Nipsey gets killed.
Yeah.
And devastating for other people, and I'm thinking like, of course, as a photographer, damn, I didn't take any photos. That would have
Sure.
been
Right.
great.
That's natural.
Even for Dave to have like a photo that I took of them together. But hey, my instinct said no. And that's a weird thing that he's gone and blah, blah, blah. Then like some months later, we go to Johannesburg. Um, for what's the big festival they had there? Jay-Z and Beyonce headline. Spacing out on the name, the Global Citizen.
Okay.
So Global Citizen Festival, and Dave is bringing Jay-Z and Beyonce up on stage. He's opening the show, blah blah blah. We're backstage. I'm shooting some really cool photos of everybody and Pharrell and Usher and Jay-Z and Beyonce and whoever's there. And at one point, Jay-Z comes over to say hi to me. And I was like, oh, that's cool. He like, I've photographed him over the years at different events or whatever, but uh, I don't feel like I know him, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
He comes over and he say, hey man, you know what I appreciate about you? It's like you don't always take pictures. Sometimes you're just hanging with us. And I
That's
was like,
cool.
that was that instinct from that night because Jay-Z was there and he noticed that I didn't take photos, and that, you know, I was like, that's why you got to listen to your instinct because maybe, it wasn't my place to take photos that night. So I listened to my instinct. So I think it's developing that relationship with the moment. It's
Oh
not
yeah.
just people, but it's learning what the moment is. And if the moment calls for, you know, one picture, maybe just so you have something, or no pictures. And that night it was no pictures. But I also have an issue with and it's something you learn. A lot of younger photographers, they're just in like that machine gun mode,
Hmm.
they're
Hmm.
just,
Spray and pray. Yeah.
yeah, like even when I go shoot like stadium shows sometimes, it's not too often. Stage is so high, I don't love it, but shut the stones like that and just having that noise in my ear of like somebody just holding down the shutter. And I asked this guy, I was like, how many photos do you have after a show? And this was a show where you can only shoot the first three songs,
Right.
right?
Typical. Yeah.
Three songs. It was like between 7 and 10,000. I was like, for three songs?
Yep.
He's like, yeah, yeah, I want to make sure I have what I. And I was like, damn. I remember nights where when Dave did Radio City and there's like 10 different artists performing that I had 2,500 photos and I was so overwhelmed to have to edit 2,500 photos. That's for a 4.5 hour show. And like 10,000 photos for three songs. So
Yeah.
that's another
That's
thing. I think, like kind of the Leica thing is also nice because you don't, that's possible, but they're not really made for that.
mm-mm.
Not really made for like, what do you call that? That there's like a term for that. I get it in sports. I get it if you have a guy running across the field, that
Right.
moment,
Right.
you got to do that. But if it's Mick Jagger, just standing there doing this, like you don't necessarily need, 10,000 photos of it.
No. No.
Now
And
I hear a lot of people are telling me they don't edit their photos anymore. They have some AI software that edits for them. A couple of people told me that this week, like, oh, you don't use that? I was like, no, I'm not really looking to do that. But they're like, oh, yeah, it'll go through all your photos and pick the ones that are in focus and centered. I was like, yeah, but I don't always shoot things
why?
centered,
Why would you
focused.
want that? It just it's like putting your camera on fully auto. You're only
Yeah.
making one choice, and that's where to point. That's about it.
And that's not even you making the choice. It's the camera making, the software making the choice. The light.
I was talking to a photographer earlier, 35-year sports photographer, and I asked him. I said, when newer photographers ask you for advice, what is a piece of advice you tend to give them? And what he said was, shoot with intent.
Yeah, yeah,
Know
yeah.
what you want to get from that image. Don't just spray and pray and hope that the camera figures it out. Shoot with intent, because if the outcome is not what you intended, learn from it and figure out how to get what you intended, but to shoot in a meaningful way. And I think that, whether it's Leica or whether it's just shooting with intent, which is a mindset,
Yeah.
understand, what you're trying to do. And I don't know that today's younger slash newer photographer, I don't know if there is the mentoring. I don't know if there's the feedback that
But
maybe others have. And you know what? On social media, since everyone is crushing it, everyone is killing it, everyone has little flame emojis. I don't know if people are getting an honest, constructive critique. And I think that that's maybe feeding into 7,000 photos in three
right,
songs.
right. I mean, yeah, it's like music to me. Like, I don't really want an album that has 500 songs on it. I just want like 12, 13 great songs.
Yeah.
So I think, but you're right about social media. I think, social media is, you know, it's like we were saying about something else before, kind of a blessing and a curse, like celebrity, but when you go off of that thing, it feels really good. When you're not on it, it suddenly feels like the world is real again. When you look at social media, it's just you get sucked in and you don't know where you are anymore and you don't know what's real and what's not real. And Twitter, I can't even go on Twitter anymore because I see news and I think it's real and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is AI or it's completely fake or you know it's some crazy Trump thing or
Oh yeah.
us thing. It's just a shame because that used to be a source of news. This used to be a place where you could actually find out even about cool music and
Mm-hmm.
art and movies and see movie trailers. Now the movie trailers are AI. Like I saw a thing, I was like, oh, this is cool. I didn't know about this, like, whatever. I don't remember what it was, but it was like this James Bond trailer with this actor. I didn't know they announced a new James Bond, and it's like a fucking fake trailer. You know
It's
what I
not
mean?
even
I don't
real.
want to, yeah, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to be on that. So I use Instagram for work and to post photos because people, when I go off of it for a while, people are always like, oh, I miss your photos and stuff. So my ego gets like, oh, I'm okay. I'll post some photos. But part of me kind of wishes I could completely live off of it, you know?
So you now about a year ago, I really went all in on vinyl records,
Oh yeah.
collecting used vinyl, and I'm sure whatever number of records you have just absolutely dwarfs mine. But for me, going from not having records since I was a kid, now I'm like 300 records in. But my
Nice.
my question is, are you still doing vinyl records, or has that sort of mellowed out for you?
Oh no, I was just an amoeba right before I left town, got a bunch
Oh,
of
you're
records.
all in.
Son Miles also collects vinyl, so
Oh, nice.
and I'm also designing vinyl, you know, so I'm still doing album covers and like the Dave records and you know other projects. So I love vinyl and I'll always be a vinyl guy.
Well,
You know,
and
that's
let me ask you about that because the scope of the artists that you have done some work with, like Air Supply, Flock of Seagulls, Aretha Franklin, Barry White, it is such a spectrum. Ace of Base.
a lot of those like the Air Supply stuff, they're just compilations that I did, you know,
Okay,
it's the greatest hits or the ultimate.
okay,
But you know, Aretha, I did that, and I photographed her at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 25th anniversary, but I also worked on that Amazing Grace movie.
okay.
My friend Alan Elliott, who I just saw also with George Clinton yesterday, was, you know, he did that movie, so I did the artwork and the titles and stuff. But some of those names when people are like, "You work with Sammy Davis Jr." I'm like, "Well, no, I wasn't born when that came out," but or you know, you did the album artwork for Inner Visions. I'm like, no, I did the deluxe edition of the reissue of the, you know,
Sure.
but you know, I still consider that stuff, you know, it's working on those artists. You
Oh
know, I
yeah,
did like over 40 James Brown releases, 20 Marvin Gaye releases, maybe, you know, I mean, Isaac Hayes and Stevie Wonder and all my favorites. And then, you know, if they're still around, most likely I photographed them as well, you know, like Stevie and some of the greats. So, um, but yeah, the list is pretty crazy, you know, the
yeah.
list is pretty nuts. And I love that, you know, I love the diversity of my catalog.
Yeah, it's super impressive. Well, I want to thank you so much for your generosity of time and taking
But
it to share everything that you have. I really appreciate it, and I know that people are going to want to follow your work, and I know they're going to want to take a look at the book Paris Blues. What's the best way for people to follow you on social media or elsewhere and kind of see what you're up to?
My Instagram's probably the best at Candy T Man, and then I have a new website. Uh, I should make sure I know the right. I'm pretty sure it's MathieuBittonPhoto.com, but MathieuBittonPhoto.com. Yeah. So I just put that together. So that's a new website. And then I kind of am figuring out all that. You know, I had one before I did BittonPhoto.com where you can buy prints. I'm figuring out how to merge everything. I've just been too busy, honestly, to work on that. But I did manage to put together a new site with a whole section of photos from Africa and music and Paris Blues and Darker Than Blue, the previous book, you know. So that's a good way of keeping up with me, I think.
Well,
But
that
Instagram's,
that's
you know,
great. Yeah, Africa travel and photography is definitely a passion of mine, and I want to
yeah.
remind everybody that we publish on the 1st and the 15th of every month, and welcome you to take a look and see what I have going on at Mitch Stringer Images on Instagram, mitchstringerimages.com online. And I wish you, until we meet again, I wish you terrific light. I wish you great shooting, and we'll talk again soon. Take care.